I am Andra Annette, and this is Nikki Cooper, my co-host, and we are Echoes of Destiny. And today we want to talk to you about something that we were just talking about, and that was hitting rock bottom. So, Nikki and myself have both been in healthcare. God, we have 75 years at least or better between us, and we have been in different aspects of healthcare. So, Nikki and I are both nurses. I'm a holistic practitioner, and she is a therapist or a hip.
Bit of everything. Jack of all trades.
Yeah, kind of everything. When you're in health, you kind of shift between different positions because your license allows you to do that. So take different venues. So we were talking about rock bottom right before the show, where Nikki and I have been working with people a really long time, and we know when they're ready and they're committed and they're ready to do that work. But unfortunately, it usually comes at a place where they are at rock bottom. Usually, there's a cardiac event, or they've been told they're going to have an amputation, or um, they're having symptoms because of them not losing weight and not being in that body that they used to be in. They are suffering with insulin resistance, diabetes, kidney issues, heart issues, and they really wait till it gets to that point before they reach out and ask for help. And what brings them in is desperation, and they're not always ready, even though they're there to get that help. Right. So, what are your thoughts on this, Nikki?
Oh, millions. It's a little bit frustrating. It does feel sometimes like that's human nature that we need to have that sort of everything's crashed. We've sort of reached that point where we are desperate and everything's crashing down around us. We've been aware of the subtlety of nudges that our own body and our intuitive side have been giving us, and we've been ignoring that or avoiding it, or we're overwhelmed with too many things that we can't focus on it. It does feel like that is an event that does wake people up to themselves. Um, it's a shame that that happens because there's a lot more of a recovery needed from that point. Sometimes some of the damage is irreversible or very, very slow to reverse. But it does seem to be the the way that we work in that's what we need to do it. And I'm not really sure why that is. I haven't quite figured that out, but I do find that quite frustrating as a clinician that it has to get to that point before people will do something. And I do wonder, I do wonder what how we manage that, how we collectively do that. I think we're just so busy and overwhelmed and overstimulated that we just don't notice what's going on with us. I had a conversation, and this is after years of noticing in so many of the assessments that you would do when you would first meet somebody, that there was a story that they had, which was, I retired 6 weeks ago. Um, and then they'd say, and I've started to notice that the belt is a bit looser, or that I'm tired than I usually am, and all of those things. And there was this kind of running scenario where 6 weeks ago I retired. So the life that I had, the stress that I had, has now ended, and now I'm aware of what's going on in my body. And I said to somebody, I was actually working in a place where I was working with different agencies, and I was talking to somebody who was already at retirement age but wasn't quite ready to give up. And I said, don't be that person. And I told this woman this story of things that I'd noticed over the years. And and sure enough, about 2 months later, I found out that she had been diagnosed with breast cancer. And she said that she rang me and she said, as soon as I found out this diagnosis, I was like, God, Nikki said to me, don't be that person that has been just so busy and so overwhelmed and so overstimulated. I haven't taken a look at what's going on for me. So, yeah, I don't know what the answer is, Andra. I wish I did. Because it's frustrating and it's sad too.
But it is very sad because so many people aren't going for those preventative tests. They're just not going because everybody has that concept that it can't happen to me until it does. So post COVID, more people are suffering with cancer than ever before because it
Mm,
did knock out your immune system. And if you weren't healthy prior, it's not about just eating well. That's not going to bring everything back up. So your gut is 70% of your immunity, but there are other aspects in your body. So when you knock that out, you got a long way to go to get that
mm,
back up because now it's affected the other systems and they're all coming down, right? So a lot of people just think I'm tired, I'm run down, but because of the impact on the immune system and how once the gut is down, it starts bringing down all the other systems. There's so much more thyroid cancers, so much more colon cancers, and so
mm.
many more breast cancers
Yeah.
than ever before. And people seem to think because they're trying to eat healthier now, that somehow escapes them. But we have to understand that if we're not going for those preventions, that we're not going to get it in the early stages. And when you're in three or four, stage 3 or 4, it's a much longer, harder road, right? But if you get it early in stage 1 or stage 2, it's so much more curable, and your outcomes and even the treatment course is going
Mm,
to be so much less on the human body, right? Because chemo and radiation, those have a horrible effect on a body. They're not just
mm.
killing good cells, they're killing, I mean, bad cells, they're killing the good cells too. And a lot of people don't understand that. So um I don't know why people aren't going for those preventions, but you have to figure we're several years out from COVID, right?
Yeah.
So if they haven't been going since COVID, it took a long time to really start going for those tests. And then when people started going, they were being told you have colon cancer. My mother-in-law had 2 forms of cancer post COVID. So I have 3 friends right now dealing with different forms of cancer. Another one who was just diagnosed, but they weren't going for those preventions until they got one of those caution signs. So caution is an acronym that we use in nursing, like a cough that doesn't heal, things like that, to let us know what we should be looking for, a mole that changes in shape and size, things like that, right? So if we notice them, we can alert someone right away while we're doing our exams. So, um, but unfortunately, and then they're getting the tests, and it's already in a late stage, right? And then the time for the biopsy, and then trying to determine if they want a second opinion because they're not sure, because people still are in that denial stage where is it really cancer? Should I go for a second opinion? And as a nurse, I would always recommend someone go for a second opinion, right? Um,
Mm.
but that takes time too, and then planning that care and things like that. So unfortunately, prevention is still the best cure, because if you're going regularly and you're getting checked, you are going to notice things. I've always been blessed to, I don't know, understand what's going on in my body, to feel things um very quickly when things were happening, and I would go to the doctor. I used to get yeast infections as a child a lot because I ate so much yogurt, right?
Mm.
And I would go to the doctor, and they would say, how do you even know this? It's barely showing up on the microscope. And I'd be like, listen, I know my body. But even all those years that doctors weren't listening to me, and I knew something was wrong, right? So if you are listening to your body, and I know that's not easy, but just during the day, being very careful about feeling your body and saying, what's going on with you today?
Mm.
What do you need right now? And holding that space for yourself, because we do spend so much time, Nikki, with everything that's going on around us, and overwhelmed with the amounts of information that's out there, and processing so many things that aren't even necessary to process in a day. And then on top of the things we already have with our families, our job, our friends, right? Um, so I wish I knew the answer for that too. I do know that I remember this gentleman that was, he was a little up there in age, and he was a really bad diabetic and he just wasn't listening.
Mm.
And he needed an amputation, and he was so sad about that amputation, right? And then um but he was in the rehab, and he was ordering fried chicken out from down the street, and Chinese food. And I was like, what are you not understanding? And some of the, he was ordering it for the staff, and I was like, how can you like participate in this? This is exactly what he's not supposed to be doing. And then he wasn't even out of rehab, and they found out that it's spread, right? And then so they had to go in, and I was off for a couple of days because we don't work 7 days usually, right? So I was off for a couple of days, and when I came back, he had another surgery. And the top part, they cut off all the toes now, right? But they left a flap, which is bizarre. So here's your toes, right? So they took this, and then there was a big flap of skin healing. And I was also the wound nurse on the unit. So I remember going to clean that, and I said, "Oh, this is just never going to work. We're going to be taking his leg, right?" So I went and I got the doctor, and I said, "What's going on? What's with this flap?" He said, "Well, I don't know, Andra. The surgeon said that he was going to heal nicely." I said, "But how?" I said, because we're pouring
Yeah.
fluid, saline into an open area. Where do you think that's going to go? I said, that's a perfect breeding ground for infection. I said, we can't have this. He's got to go back to the surgeon. They got to close it up, or what are they going to do? Right. It took, I don't even remember how long it took to get in touch with the surgeon, but I remember that shortly thereafter, he was scheduled for below the knee, and then we were fitting him for a prosthetic,
Mm.
you know? So the first surgery was traumatic, but time we got to the knee, he was okay with it, and he was still eating that food. And I said to him, what is it going to take for you? But he just, you cannot force people to
No.
your conclusions. You really can't. You can lead them and tell them this is going to benefit you so much better. But I mean, that was a clear sign of malpractice if I ever saw one. And I'm in the fields, so I'm glad nobody called me on that, because I would have been like, no, it should have never happened. But
I
because
do wonder I do wonder if and I think back to, obviously being a cradle to grave nurse, working so much with that early neuroplasticity and the early architecture, is that when a child puts their hand in something and it hurts and there's that shock and they look around to see the reaction of the caregiver, the attachment figure, etc. But then their brain says, let's try that again, but they do it slower and they don't shut their hand in as much. So they then go, oh yeah, that wasn't a good situation. And then they might do it a third time, but it's almost like slow motion and they're not even really trapping their hand. But funnily enough, they've now wired this response to, okay, hand draw, not a good idea. Now I know not to do that. And I do wonder whether some of these things that we're talking about is that we have to get it wrong before we get it right. And that's how our brain learns that that's not what's good for us. So perhaps that I was just reflecting when you were talking, maybe that's got a lot to do with it. They have to hit that rock bottom. They have to have that collapsing tower moment, whatever you want to call it, because they have to learn it the hard way. And now the brain has made that connection that this is not good for me. Um, and the other thing our nervous systems weren't designed for the level of stress that we are in continuously. Back in
yeah,
with our ancestors, they would, they would walk for miles, not eat, walk for miles, have the adrenaline rush with the kill and whatever situation it was to hunt for their food. Then they would feast, and then they would, do what they do. So our nervous system, but we weren't designed to sustain that level of adrenaline and cortisone and that sort of sympathetic response for we weren't designed to prolong it and sustain it and be chronically in it.
But
And I
that
think that everyone
that
is. That's what everyone's living and pushing and distracting is part of that response. We're just busy, overworked, overstimulated, overwhelmed. Our nervous systems weren't designed for that. So how can we possibly have cognitive, rational, quieten the mind thoughts about what's going on with us when we're not even, we're just living and in the complete opposite. It's like you're in in a chaotic situation. So yeah, just I mean, we keep going back to
but
this, don't
we
we?
are
We keep
setting
circling
ourselves.
back to the stress.
But it all comes back to the stress. Stress is in every cell of your body, your hair, your saliva,
Yeah.
everywhere. That cortisol runs through your entire body. So everything you're doing under stress is affecting your entire body. And people, um, they don't, they just don't seem to understand that, And I even heard someone say that your body doesn't know the difference between stress. And I was like, yes, they do. There's eustress and distress. There's a big difference. So, um, and I was like, how could you even say that? But you have to look at this from the the projectile of where this is going, because
Mm,
it is going to decrease our lifespan because people are not going to be able to do it. And if you look at it from the composition of the body, just like that heart that is beating in tachycardia, and then it goes into AFib and it's
mm,
going, going,
mm.
going, going, and then it shuts down, it collapses, and that's the end. So
Yeah.
we are doing that to our nervous system at an extremely high rate on a day-to-day basis that the body is going to shut down. And that's why the state of the health of the world is what it is now, because
Mm.
you're not going to lose weight, like, and have all those other stress factors. Because if you're trying to lose weight and you're under all this stress and you're stressing about what to eat and stressing about this, you are defeating the very purpose of
Yeah.
what you're doing. It's like, why even bother? Just eat whatever the hell you want to, because if you're going to stress about it, you're not going to get those outcomes either way. And
No.
people just don't understand that. And as a community and as a country, we need to start looking at what we're setting our children up for. Like, even kids have to be in school at such a ridiculously early hour when their body is still in rest mode, and then they are on from the time they go to school, on, and then they get home and they're loaded with homework, on,
Mm.
and then they get back up and they do it all over again. So we're setting them up,
Yep.
no wonder they're being diagnosed with ADHD, depression, and kids we're seeing these high suicidal rates because it's
Yep.
too much for their little brains to fathom to have to do every day. And we're setting up the future generation for craziness. And now you have all this AI stuff out there, right? And if you watch the acceleration of, you'll see, we saw one post that AI is now here, and now there's 100 different apps that you can buy to do different things, and
Mm.
somebody gets an idea and it takes off, and that's it, and they're off to the races. Oh, I can make money with this, I could do this, I could do this, and it's just crazy. And now it can run your business. Now it can do your emails. Now it can automate this. And there's going to be a moment, and I think they're selling that under the concept that people will be able to step back and relax. But it is an
They won't.
artificial, no, because it is an artificial intelligence, and it's our brains don't work as quickly as this is progressing.
Hmm.
And just trying to keep up with that is going to put us in cortisol hell,
It's
right?
going to be stressful.
Yes. So, um, everything that's happening, there's always a good aspect and there's a bad aspect. Can it help you in your business? Yes. If it really does do all those automations and things like that and allows you to step back and focus on what's going on in your body, then it's a great thing. But if you stay on that on and you're always on to the next thing, oh, they got a new one and a new one and a new one, forget about it. And people, I was, on another show the other day, and I was talking with another professional, and I was saying, you can't show up helping people for health and what can I do for you? How you doing? Are you feeling okay? People know when you're frazzled, and
Mm.
you have to be the forward facing person in your business. And if you don't look like you have it together, I wouldn't go to you for help,
No.
right? I mean, would you hire someone to work with and they got kids screaming behind them, running around, or, that they didn't look healthy themselves, or, they couldn't sit still like me. I'm always moving. My brain works much faster
But
than my body.
that's the difference between walking the walk and talking the talk, isn't it, really? I mean, it's like I remember, when we both started nursing, there was a lot of health professionals that were smoking.
I know. Listen, I was one of them with a cigarette in my hand,
And you'd be giving advice to somebody about quitting smoking, but you'd be
but
smelling of cigarettes yourself. There was a an irony there.
yeah, and that was what it took for me to quit because I felt like
Mm.
a hypocrite. And I said, who am I to be, and then you know, um I was under so much stress and all those other things, and I wasn't taking care of me. I was putting so much into other people and I wasn't taking care of myself. So I had to step back and start taking care of myself. Otherwise I'd still
Mm.
be in that body, right? But um I had to be honest with myself and be willing to make
Mm.
that commitment to myself, right? Because it was destroying my life. I wasn't happy. Then my whole life was work and home, right?
Yeah.
And for me, that bottom was looking in the mirror and saying, "Where did you go? Who the hell
That's
are you?
survival
And
mode. You're in survival mode.
who are you? And where did Andra go? Because I don't know who you are." And
That's not me.
no, and but I did have to do that inner work too because there
Mm.
was a lot of trauma in my past, and there was a lot of things I was holding on to, people I just couldn't get myself to forgive, and that had nowhere to go in my body, so I was holding on to all of that, right, and it
Mm.
was showing up in my exterior and certainly my physical world. And when I tell people that this is all part of that process of um losing weight is not difficult at all. It's what most people struggle with is keeping that off. And you're not going to keep it off
Mm.
until you get rid of all that other stuff because you're going to keep looking for those fixes. You get almost addicted to repairing yourself because you're still hurting
Yeah.
and you haven't unpacked the real hurt, right? So
And there's a dopamine loop there too.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
there's the self-sabotage, and then there's putting myself back together again. And there's a significant amount of dopamine hit, and a lot of people are stuck in that dopamine loop at the moment as well. I worked with somebody who had a very much a body dysmorphia, and so she would go really, really hard out, put herself under incredible strain, terrible self-image, and then it would all come back again, and this continuous cycle. Yeah, it's like a dopamine hit. They're addicted to scavenging, I suppose, and looking for fixes, and but then at the same time, as soon as it's finished, we haven't actually challenged that belief that got us there in the first place, or really done that deep inner work. So you're always going to find something external to match what's going on inside, and eventually it's going to recalibrate into that same scenario, and then it's like, oh, hit rock bottom. um hmm, okay, here we go again. I'm back into the putting myself through the stress of that really extreme stuff again, and then I relax and that belief sort of takes over, and I start doing all those things that I've always done. And I think that's the thing about, we talk about early intervention and preventative care and stuff like that. And it's you cannot tell me it's lack of knowledge and lack of resources. We are
It's not.
s we're saturated, we're drowning in information. So the question is, why aren't you? And that's a question that only someone can internally answer themselves when they're ready to ask themselves that question. No amount of browbeating or leaflet giving or Dr. Googling or anything like that is going to help that because it's not because you don't know.
No,
It's
it's not.
because you
But
don't want to.
when you keep looking for that outside validation, you don't feel full in one area of your life or another.
Mm,
And that dopamine effect is it fixes you trying to fill that hole. And you have to get to the bottom of where that hole is, right? So,
yeah.
and it's not pretty and it's not easy. And I'd be lying if I told you it was. There were a lot of things that I had to deal with that I didn't want to deal with, right? And when I started to, I said, "Oh no, no, this sounds familiar. I don't want to be here," you know. But and that's why I really got into the journaling and all that stuff. But I mean, I had journals on and all my whole life. But um, I think that when you're by yourself and you're journaling, you are more likely to open up to your feelings and really get deep about what it is. So I used to have this practice where I would just doodle without any goal or a thought about what was on my mind, and I would just go with those feelings. And some of the things that I would write during that time were like eye opening. Like I keep asking
Mm,
myself, and why is that? And why is that? And why is that? And it was a lot. It was a journey, and I still have things that trigger those responses in me today. But that's part of that whole healing journey, being aware of what triggers, like sometimes um I'll feel almost like the hair standing up on the back of my neck, you know, and not literally, but I'll get that feeling inside, and
mm,
I'll say, okay, is it them or is it me? What about them is triggering me, or what about this situation makes myself uncomfortable? And it is about acknowledging that and noticing what you're noticing at that time, so that you're more alert to it next time, right?
mm,
You're more familiar with that feeling and why it's coming up, right? Because sometimes it could be around something that's planned that's making us uncomfortable, and this triggers it. It might not have anything to do with the person that's triggering it, right? Um, there, there's a few people that I've met in my life that just gave me a really bad vibe, and I just
mm,
could not understand why they made me uncomfortable, but I knew they were off limits. Like that I wouldn't pursue a friendship, an acquaintance, or anything, because from the very start of it, I just had a really bad feeling, and I couldn't control how I felt. And it was nothing personal against them, but if it's going to
mm,
make me uneasy in my body, then it's not a good fit for me, right? So,
mm,
so it is about having those boundaries and protecting what you feel. So whether it's a good feeling or a bad feeling, like I've been around people that I'm just overjoyed to be around, and those relationships they do work for me because I
mm,
I do want to be happy, right? Um, there's also those relationships that when you haven't seen someone, we've all had friends like this. They're Debbie Downers. Every time you're around them, it's always the poor me and what's going on with them, and you could be with them for 3 hours and then they'll never say, so how are you doing? Right? It's all about what they're going through in their life and how bad things are. So we do have to learn to isolate ourselves from those type of situations because we have enough going on in this space and controlling this space. And after we learn to control this, then we could worry about that, right? Um, and just cleaning up your side of the street.
yeah, mood hoovers, I call them. Those
What do
Debbie
you call them?
Downers.
Mood
Mood
hoovers?
hoovers.
Oh, I like that. I like that. I'm gonna use that. Mood hoovers.
They're mood hoovers. They just change the vibe. And yeah, it's it's interesting because I there's often something that makes you uncomfortable and I because my brain's a little bit out there too. And so I think, what is this trying to tell me? What is it about them that's making me uncomfortable? Is it something that I've got to do a piece of work? Because I often think of it like a mirror. There's something about them that's mirroring something about myself that is either unhealed or unloved, or something that I have some shame around, something that I do, or I've had an experience that I've done something similar and it's just something I haven't come to terms with. So yeah, there's always a little piece of work there. Yeah, we're so layered. We're like a phyllo pastry on steroids. We've got so many layers. We're just never going to get to the. I don't know if we will ever get to the bottom of the core of it all. Maybe that's not what we're supposed to do. But yeah,
We
it's an
are if we
interesting.
ever want to move into that ending place. Because
Well, but then funnily enough, and you know this too, is that most people at the end of their lives finally take stock of their life, don't they?
yeah, yeah,
They have a
yes.
really good look at it, and they realize that all of that busyness, all of that doingness and not enoughness that they felt for many years, and all of that stuff that they've acquired, all of the materialism and the consumerism and the knowledge and the learnings and all of that, none of that in the end is what is mattered to people. It's really, they take a massive stock take and they have to now let go of all of that.
I know it's hard. I mean, we talk about self-actualization a lot in nursing school and what that looks like. And I did work with geriatrics for a long time, and I saw people that saved their whole life for their end of life and never lived their life,
No,
and then
no.
at the end of the life that they were saving for, they were so ill they couldn't enjoy it. Um,
Mm.
I guess, you know, I think that's kind of why I don't live with limitations. Like if I want to do something, even if it's something I've never done before, I just put my best foot forward and I go for it. And if it happens, it
Mm.
happens. And if not, I figure out why it's not working and
Yeah.
I just do it. Because life is too short. My home, most of my family's gone. I mean, I have a lot of cousins and stuff like that, but I know that I don't want to be that person at the end of my life because I did that end of the life look when I was in my 30s.
Yeah.
I wasn't liking what I saw in my 30s. I saw I hadn't lived and done everything that I really wanted to do. And I think that piece of losing so much of my family
Mm.
and things that they had, dreams and aspirations they had that they never got to, they kept saying tomorrow, made me not want to be that tomorrow girl, and realize that we just, every day we just have today. So live it as best as you can. We're not guaranteed tomorrow. None of us are. But you
Yeah.
you are guaranteed a better tomorrow based on the way you live today, right? So that means taking care of yourself emotionally, physically, spiritually, being honest about what you want and going for it, being true to who you really are, and just showing up as yourself. Who the hell cares if people don't like you, right? I mean, if
Yeah.
I
Be
worried
your own
about
best friend.
yeah, I mean, if I worried about people liking me or what I said or did, I'd never leave the house because because I know that I'm out there and I don't really care, you know? I mean, to me, things I say make perfect sense. Someone else listening might be like, "The hell is this girl talking about?" But I don't care. Not to offend anybody, but there was so many years that I was that people pleaser. And you know what I'm talking about because we do
Mhm.
it at work, we do it at home, we
Yep.
do it with our friends because you do want to belong and you do want to be accepted. But somewhere along the line, that's how I lost myself. So if you want to get back to who you are, you do have to slowly get out of all those habits, the people pleasing, the yes
Hmm.
person, Andra, can you do this? Sure. Andra, how about this? Okay, I'll get to it. And
Me.
yeah, and I was always raising my hand to help. And I wasn't taking care of myself and I wasn't helping myself. So
I listened to somebody say yesterday, somebody had posted something that I looked at, and they said, would you talk to your best friend the way that you talk to yourself? So I replied to her and I said, would you talk to your younger self the way that you talk to yourself? Because you already know what that did and does. So
yeah,
would you do that? And she really stopped and she went, "Oh my God, yes, no, I wouldn't. You'd never go back to that younger version of yourself and talk to that version the way that we probably talk to ourselves a lot, that sort of
it's very sad.
self-deprecate. It is, it's true, but it actually you have to when people are in that mindset and they're sort of gone down that trajectory of blaming themselves, judging themselves, all of those things, that's a really good way of reframing that. Would you go back to that younger version of yourself at that pivotal point in life where some of those journeys and crossroads that you've taken that maybe you've got regrets or shames about? Would you say that same thing to that child or whatever age you were? And the truth is, you probably wouldn't because you knew what had happened as a result of that. So it's a really good stock take. So
Yeah, that's a great thing to try. So we're gonna end it here because I think that was a wonderful piece of information
Zen moment.
she gave to you to really go back and ask those questions of yourself. Would I treat the younger version of myself this way? And if you say no, then that's an eye opener. Um, but every day, just try to be kind. If you could be anything in this world, be kind because even though we are the most important person in our life, we never ever know what someone else is going through. We can't even imagine what's going on behind closed doors somewhere else. And that smile, that door that you hold might be the difference in someone's day. So just keep that in mind always. So I am Andra Annette, and this is Nikki Cooper. To your health. Have a great day, guys.